It's Wednesday morning, and a big hello to everybody out there in comic land, all you geeks and geekettes tuning in here for the inside dope, the kind of information you literally cannot get anywhere else because, I don't know, how many comic book professionals with decades of experience are willing to just take on any and all questions and give you the total, complete skinny on all of your nerdy curiosity demands. And I speak as a licensed nerd myself. So do not take offense. It's a brotherhood. It's a sisterhood of geekiness. Live it. Love it. Lean into it. Creeper Weirdo. In a few videos of yours, you mentioned that you gave up on Mad and a popular Florida writer, Carl Hyacin, because they became too mean. I think what you mean, as I feel like I think I get what you mean, as I feel like I can see when a writer is under the impression they are being edgy. A question I have is, what is the difference between a story with a harsher critique of something, politics, ideology, etc., versus a story that's just mean? Is it a case of writing while angry or lack of honesty? I think it's a little bit of both. I mean, once upon a time, Mad Magazine used to make fun of everything. Left, right, center. They basically... Mad Magazine was a terrific gift to the generations that read it up until recently, in that the thing about Mad Magazine is that it tweaked the establishment, and it questioned authority, and it caused people, kids reading it, to develop a level of skepticism toward politicians, advertising, things like that. To not accept mediocrity, to not be lied to think about what you're being told. And for much of its life, Mad was like that. I mean, they made as much fun of JFK and LBJ as they did of Nixon and the rest. But in recent years, they picked a side, and the side is the left. They went easy on Obama. They did a couple of covers where he was made nauseous by Alfred E. Newman, but how is that critical of Obama? When Trump became president, they went all in anti-Trump, portraying him in ways that they weren't funny. Like late night comedians who receive more applause than laughs because the audience is agreeing with what they're saying. And that's where Mad Magazine went. They put their finger on the pulse of the American public and thought, everybody hates Trump because everybody I know hates Trump. And so every Mad Magazine is going to feature derogatory and demeaning depictions of Trump and mocking him and his policies and views and mannerisms. Certainly, there's a lot that's funny about Donald Trump, and often he's intentionally funny. But there's a difference between making fun of someone just to be mean and having fun with someone. Now, I did Trump's Space Force comic with Timothy Lim and many other talented folks, and I don't hate Donald Trump, but I thought the idea of Donald Trump leading a military force into space was too funny not to do. And so, as I said before, we didn't make fun of Trump. We had fun with Trump. And consequently, people on the left enjoyed it because it was, mockery and questioning authority and the rest of that. And people on the right enjoyed it because it was like, a final destination, a depiction of Trump as a hero, even though everybody recognized it was entirely tongue-in-cheek. And it was just fun. It was just meant to be fun and everybody have a good time. And we didn't get into policies or politics or anything, not to too great a degree. Yeah, we did show Nancy Pelosi in perhaps an unflattering light, but we suggested that perhaps Nancy Pelosi was an alien in disguise. But come on, it was all part of the story. And Dana Carvey, I listened to him talk one time. He was critiquing Alec Baldwin's portrayal of Donald Trump on Saturday Night Live. And he was saying that he didn't like it and he didn't find it funny because there was no, it was obviously Baldwin's portrayal came from a place of dislike. And Carvey's thing is that you can't really dislike, you can't imitate someone you dislike just to bring them down. It's not funny, it's not entertaining, it's not fair. Carvey said that, he wasn't entirely in sync with all of George Bush's politics when he was imitating George Bush on Saturday Night Live. But he said, but he liked George Bush, even before he met him. He just said there was something about him that was endearing. He was, he was sort of a grandpa figure. And some of his malapropisms and phraseology and stuff that Carvey leapt upon, particularly the sort of halting phrasing that sometimes Bush would use, it was ripe. But Carvey's portrayals were never nasty. They were funny, and apparently even the Bushes found them funny. And Carvey was a frequent guest at the White House, even though he wasn't really going easy on George Bush. But the portrayal was accurate enough that it struck a chord, and everybody laughed, which was the point. By the way, Carvey said that he came by his George Bush voice by saying he was imagining Mr. Rogers trying to talk like John Wayne. So that's how he arrived at his impersonation. Another really elegant example from, again, Saturday Night Live. There was a routine in the 80s in which Phil Hartman played Ronald Reagan. And the gist of the gag is that it was after hours at the White House, and Reagan was with his cabinet members, and they were planning global strategy. And the bit is that Reagan was this energetic powerhouse. He wasn't like what we saw on television, a sort of laid-back, laconic, happy guy. He was like this dictatorial Mr. Know-it-all, and he had all the facts. And he was running his cabinet ragged. They were exhausted because he was so far ahead of them on everything and pushing them into the late hours to give him answers. And the funniest scene in the bit was when there's a call from the Chinese premier, and Reagan picks up and begins a conversation in fluent Mandarin. And everybody found the bit funny. People on the left found it funny because they thought, well, this is ridiculous. Ronald Reagan is nothing like this. He's not an intellectual giant. He's not energetic. He's not this. He's not that. And people on the right found it funny because they were like, well, this is probably how Reagan was behind the scenes. He wasn't the same way as he was when he appeared in the American public. He was very much in charge in the White House. He was very much had his, was conversant with the facts and what it needed to be president. He was a fully informed, intelligent guy, extremely articulate if you've ever read his writing. And, of course, the Saturday Night Live people were mocking Reagan by doing this, but it was a gentle mocking. It wasn't from a place of hate. They were taking something they perceived as a contrast to reality, as a source for humor. Now, history informs us, looking back, that the energetic, informed version of Reagan, the one that Saturday Night Live was putting forth as preposterous, is actually pretty close to the truth. Reagan knew his stuff, and was in charge, even though he had been shot only months earlier. So that's it. There's a difference between making fun and having fun, and I'm all for having fun. Nick Zaramatidis, did you happen to know the differences, i.e. advantages and disadvantages, of working for one independent publisher, Dark Horse, Image, Boom Studios, etc., over another? Also, do you think it's best to work for one publisher or spread your work out to different ones? As a writer, it's never a good idea to put all your eggs in one basket. It's never, as a freelancer of any kind, it's never a good idea to get too comfortable, to rely on one contact or one contract or one outfit to pay your bills. You want to spread out a little bit. In my long, long career, I've only been exclusive 2 times. I was exclusive at DC for 1 year, which I hated because it actually restricted the amount of work I could do. I was guaranteed a certain payment that year, but I ran through my commitments early in the contract, and I was left with months of not enough to do and nowhere else to go to write. So I just wrote ahead on everything. I wrote into the next year. And then, of course, I was exclusive for most of the time I was at CrossGen, which was fine because there was plenty of work offered to me. There was no limit on the work. And, it was an interesting environment. There was a reason to go exclusive. Alessi was paying all the bills for a facility and everything else, and you wanted to make sure that while you were there working in the building, you were working for him and nobody else. Made perfect sense. So he was getting your 100% potential. But yeah, you want to spread yourself around. You want to work for different people, and you want to do as much creator-owned stuff as you can. Work for hire is fine, but when you get to a certain age, you're going to want some royalty checks, and creator-owned is the best way to do that. If you own something, you have something to sell. You have intellectual property that you can market. So yeah, you want to spread yourself around. And is there a difference between the companies? There's slight differences between the independents. Boom, I don't know about. I was never able to, they've never called me. So, Dark Horse, the thing with Dark Horse is they're very cautious. If you present them with something, it takes them a long time for them to make up their mind. And usually when they get to making up their mind, the answer is usually no. Because they're more afraid, I think, of making a mistake than having a success. So, but yeah, and all of these companies have their favorites, their darlings that they hire. Every single independent has that. And until you're on the list of darlings, you're really not going to get any work there unless you come in with a really killer high concept. And sometimes that's not even a guarantee. So, but you do, back in the 80s and 90s, I was working for like 6 different companies at the same time because they were offering me the opportunities, and I dug it, and allowed me to reach different audiences. And all of these companies do have different audiences. So yeah, you want to spread yourself out. Jason Thompson, there's a new Asbats figure coming. I wonder who designed Asbats' costume and what did you think of it? Thanks. And thank you for supplying the image of the new Asbats figure. Who designed Asbats and Azrael? It was Joe Quesada who did the first Azrael mini-series that introduced the character so that, he would have a background when he made him the new Batman. And Joe designed the Asbats costume. He did a bunch of turnarounds and drawings. But the thing is, he never had to draw that costume himself. And more than one artist complained about what a bear it was to draw that costume over and over and over again. And, was it fair that the guy who designed it never had to do that? It's kind of like following Kirby on Galactus, but at least Kirby drew Galactus over and over again. So, he's sort of like, okay, if I did it, you can do it. But Joe never drew Asbats in a story. And but generally the artists complained about Asbats anyway because they prefer to draw classic Batman. It's like, this isn't what I signed on for. This pretender in the silly costume with the giant bowling balls on his shoulders. Dylan, with the hype building for Moon Knight's Disney Plus series, I was wondering what are your thoughts on the character and your run with him? Issues from your run were some of the first I read of the character when I was a kid. I don't hear many people talking about it whenever Moon Knight runs are discussed. Marvel treats my Moon Knight run almost as if it's not canon or didn't exist. It never reprinted it. I assume with the television show, if the television show is any kind of a success, they will eventually get to my run. And my run was 2 years long, so it's quite a big chunk. And I know some Moon Knight purists don't like it because of the approach we took, but the approach was editorially determined that they wanted only the Mark Spector persona. That they wanted to ditch the idea of the split personalities and run with the character who was a mercenary, because that was kind of a hip thing going on at the time. Mercenaries were hot. People were all talking about mercenaries. And Soldier of Fortune magazine was out, and it was just, just a lot of loose talk about mercenaries, and they thought, though, this is a good time to lean in on Moon Knight's former military past, and I was cool with that. So I ran with it for 2 years with Sal Voluto with me as on art for most of the run, and yeah, it was a good time. I enjoyed the character. It was fun. It was kind of practice for doing Batman a little bit, because he does kind of have an Alfred, and he has a lair, and he has his one vehicle, and so yeah, it was fun. As far as what the TV show is going to be like, what permutation of Moon Knight are they going to base it on? I have no idea. It kind of looks like the split personality thing. They're going to go there. So yeah, I'm not an enormous fan of what they're doing at Disney Plus, but I'll hold my fire till I've actually seen it. William Martin. I always wondered how the relationship with a comic book changes after the writer stops working on it, or when they first start, for that matter. After you stopped writing Detective Comics, did you continue to read it or the other Bat books? What was the last Batman or Detective issue you read? Probably the last one I read was proofing the last issue I wrote. Yeah, I was following the Batman books prior to getting hired on the Robin miniseries, and but afterwards I didn't, because it's sort of like I've been there. I've spent 11 years thinking about these characters and writing them and everything else. Now it's someone else's turn, but I had no real curiosity for what anybody was going to do after me. I might have if there were some, people I was interested in following. If Kelly Puckett had continued writing, now I would have kept reading the books. I did read quite a few of Scott Peterson's Batman animated things, because I kept getting comps from DC for a while, and I read, I followed Scott Peterson's stories in the Batman animated, but for the most part, now I didn't. It's, as I've often said, it's like watching your kids go off with the new dad. Do you really want to know how they spent the weekend? Okay. John Harrell. Is it even okay to write a story based on another story? You can define okay in whatever terms you wish. Anyways, it seems that the answer is yes, based on the fact that this seems to happen all the time. If you hear someone tell a story and you enjoy it, can you then go write a story based on it? Do you credit the original story? A close example might be a newspaper article that contains a story you like and want to retell. Does it matter if the original story is fictional or true? Well, you don't want to be stealing stories. But as Nietzsche once said, a writer uses his own and his friends' intellects. And this is true. If you tell me a story and it's interesting, a story from real life, something that happened to you at Target, and there's an aspect in there that I can use, I will use it. Although I may not be conscious that I used it. I may remember it a year later when I'm writing something, and I'm like, oh, hey, somebody told me something once. I don't remember who. But this is good. And, it's not like I'm recreating their experience 100%. It's just I'm using some aspect, a turn of phrase, some element in their story that fits what I'm doing now, and I just stick it in there. My wife says she doesn't like reading my work because she sees things in my work that she told me, and that I don't remember she told me. As far as using news stories, if you want to be inspired by a news story, well, it's a news story. If it's any kind of a news story at all, hundreds of people have written about it. And if you're writing a fictionalized version or using elements of it for a story, that's fair play. People do that all the time. The television show Law and Order, used they fictionalized, true events. to my, I don't know, I don't watch the show, but they I assume that they still do today. Is that show even on anymore? I don't know. There's a question for everybody. What's on now? No one knows. But yeah, I mean, everything's fair play for a writer. You don't want to lift someone else's plot line. You don't want to steal from another writer. You don't want to steal from fiction. Although if you read a lot of fiction, it puts things in your head. And of course, there's always, standard action things. I mean, I've written my own version of Die Hard. I'm sure a lot of other writers have as well. It's recognizably like Die Hard, but it's not Die Hard. I didn't steal any of the elements. I just stole the basic concept. I shouldn't say steal. I should say borrowed, because even Die Hard isn't the first Die Hard story. So there you go. I mean, yeah, it's all fair game for a writer, and if you get called on it, you get called on it. But you don't want to be, you don't want to be lifting wholesale for another writer. Or like Aaron Sorkin, steal from yourself. Just keep repeating dialogue exchanges over and over again with different characters speaking them. Dan Jeffries. I came across an old interview where Scott Beatty said that in addition to year one stories for Robin, Dick, Batgirl, and Nightwing, you both had wanted to make a year one series for Jason Todd as well, but the opportunity was never presented. Since you don't expect to work with DC again, can you share how you would have told Jason's origin story? Well, like all of our other year one stories, we wouldn't have told it that differently from the way it was told originally. I mean, now this was all proposed before the return of Jason Todd. So when we were writing it, Jason Todd was, still in his comic book grave. What we plan on doing was just going back to the original presentation of Jason Todd, as well as the kind of soft reboot version they did, and sort of reconciling the two. And but there was it's certainly a good story, even though readers initially didn't respond to Jason Todd, didn't like him. It still was a good story. And also setting it up, knowing the horrific ending his story had, there was a lot to deal with. It probably would have been a little darker version of a year one than our previous ones, because of the nature in which Jason Todd's story initially ended. But I can't remember any specifics or anything like that. Scott Beatty probably could, but I can't. But we were both looking forward to it. We thought it was a great idea, but we were the only ones who thought that. So that was the end of that. We never got to do it. Hey, if you've got a question like the ones you just heard me answer, or you got comments or whatever, the best way to contact me is at brunobookstore@gmail.com. brunobookstore@gmail.com. And currently, I'm involved with Graham Nolan's new project, his new crowdfunding project, Giant-Sized Two-Fisted Manly Tales. I'm going to have at least 2 stories in here, one with Dave Williams, one with Larry Stroman. This is Rock'em Sock'em, tough guy entertainment. It's going to be 100 pages, 10-page stories, story and art, cover to cover, big fat volume. It's doing very well at Indiegogo, which I urge you to go over there and support it. We're off to a flying start, but I really want to see us get to the 150,000 mark, because I want a hardcover of this, and that's the stretch goal there, is a hardcover. And I need to talk to Graham. If we get to 200,000, can we have an oversized hardcover? I think that would be cool, to make it truly a giant-sized, two-fisted manly tale that it takes 2 hands to hold. Just a big old comic book. Treasury edition, whatever. So Graham's going to go, I hate you, Chuck, for even bringing that up. Yeah, go over to Indiegogo, look for it, look for Graham Nolan, look for giant-sized two-fisted manly tales, and check out the artwork, because I think Graham's adding new stuff all the time, and it's worth a peek. So that's it for me. I want to thank you all for listening, watching, liking, spreading the word, and subscribing. It's very much appreciated, and I'll see you all down the road.